Hello, everyone. I am Sara Hill, and I'm a newcomer to REBA. So, yeah. As our RoleMapper. So we're quite excited that this is our first time here. So I don't know if any of you know who RoleMapper is, but we're a platform that uses AI and technology, other technologies, to basically help you manage the data and processes around jobs, work, and skills. So we connect into your HCM platforms, effectively a workspace for managing all of the data and the various processes that are often quite manual around jobs, work, and skills. So we're on a bit of a mission at RoleMapper to help companies get control of the chaos of their data and unleash that power that exists in the jobs, skills, and work data. And a real passion of ours at RoleMapper, and actually one of the foundational principles, is inclusion. So we've designed the platform with inclusion at the heart. So if you want to connect with me, that's me on my LinkedIn. I think I might share it a bit later on too. Right, here we go. So I've been speaking to quite a few people today, and also companies over the last X number of months, and there's a massive theme around pay transparency here today, by the sounds of things. But also I've been talking to people about skills and skills-based approach. And it's quite interesting because we're sort of sitting in this almost like juxtaposition of, you have the desire for a skills-based organization, those flexible work structures, skills-based data models, and flexible career paths. But sitting alongside that, you've then got this increased legislation that we're all experiencing and need for fair compensation, and actually need for kind of more accuracy in reporting, which actually means that you've just got to be a bit more structured in how you're approaching things. So it's almost like we've got this sort of juxtaposition, this tension, because both of those scenarios actually need to be true. You need that flexibility, but you need the structure. But they're all connected. And that means that we've got to think differently. We've got to think differently about how we're managing our data. So we need to shift our thinking from those traditional structures to a more dynamic, flexible structure. And that's really what I'm going to talk to you about today. And I'm going to talk about how we can use AI and technology to make that shift. And I have my fingers and toes crossed that I don't get too techie and that you stay with me. So I might check in just to see if I've gone down too much of a rabbit hole. But here we go. So the structure for today. So one of the many questions, how many of you are actually impacted by the pay transparency, EU pay transparency? There are quite a few. How many of you in your organisation are thinking about skills? Quite a lot. So I'm going to use the theme of pay transparency and connect in the skills, but what I'm going to talk through, even if that's not relevant for you, is completely applicable for everybody. So I want to show you how AI and technology can basically help you fast track job models, so creating architectures, groupings, skills, so building out skills frameworks, that pay progression criteria that's required of the EU directive. And I'm going to do that with a bit of a theme running through around inclusion. So, job models. So with the theme of pay transparency, and forgive me for those who aren't affected by it, but it's just quite an interesting one because I think it is going to come over here in the UK. One of the things is around the category of worker. You'll know, those of you will know all about that. And there's a requirement to basically, fundamentally, employees have a right to request information about pay for groups of workers who perform jobs that are the same work, so kind of the same job, or they could be kind of deemed to be potentially similar, or work of equal value, right? So, what does that mean for your data? So let's break this down. Firstly, jobs of equal value. So how many of you, quick question, so how many of you think that you have really good visibility of all the jobs that you have on the ground, like not the titles, but actually the actual jobs, and you know which ones are the same and which ones are different? Oh my, not even one hand. Okay, all right, telling. So if you have a presence here, you need to know that, right? You need to have a view of all of your jobs. all right, so then I was going to ask you another question, but actually it's not, this is, how many of you know how many jobs are actually similar? Could look at what jobs are similar. I'm going to take that as a no. Slight nuances, you're going to have to be able to look and see what jobs, what work, similar work, to be able to equate that to value. So a final question then around value. So with the E directive, equal value doesn't necessarily just mean grade or level. Yet they're an outcome, but it's actually the value that's attributed to the level of the skill, the effort and responsibility, and any other factors that you decide. So how many of you could say that actually you could easily show the value criteria across all of your jobs? Oh my gosh, okay. So here we go, right? So this is the challenge. And this, it all comes down to the quality and accessibility of our job data and how accurate, how consolidated it is. I mean, this is really telling. And you need to be able to consolidate that data, to be able to surface and interrogate it, so that you can have a view of equal work for equal value. This is where, like so many organizations that have been in the press, have got into trouble. And the challenge is that seeing, I was going to say like the small show of hands, but actually like the no show of hands, is that the state of your data, that's going to be one of the biggest challenges with you kind of getting out of that. So let's focus on the data. Just really quickly, when I talk about job data, I'm specifically talking about all the fundamental component parts of job data. So I mean the jobs, I mean the titling, I mean the work that goes into a job, I mean the skills. So that's what I mean about job data. We at RoleMapper call that a job model data. And so if we want to be able to easily compare equal work for equal value, then we need to have this all consolidated. And then all of that will be underpinned by however your value metrics. So like if you use levels, if you use evaluation criteria or pay. So today, I'm going to focus on that work component, right? I'm not going to talk about the value, I'm going to talk about the work and how we can actually get a better handle and have more hands raised in the room around actually having visibility around that. So if we need to understand the jobs, we need to be able to group, we need to be able to map the jobs. To do that, we need to be able to gather all of the work, right? We need to basically go through a process of deconstructing and validating this. So you can use advancements in NLP to help you do this. So let me just explain how this works. So we want to get all of the work together. So work can be inferred from the job title, can be inferred from the content of the job, so the work and the skills that exist in the job, the tasks and the objectives, the nature of the team, the kind of organizational unit, so all of that. The job data is then extracted, so I'm going to get a bit techie here, so bear with me. So job data is extracted, it's deconstructed into component parts. So deconstruct component parts, so we can use that to inform the data. So we then use what's called automated text extraction to pull structured information from unstructured data. And then another terminology, we also then use something that's called named entity recognition, which effectively enables us to extract those tags, so extract the work, extract the skills from unstructured text. And it enables you to effectively deconstruct all of that content about your work and find the core DNA of work and skills that exist. And we then use models to analyze, it's models that they're called embeddings-based models, if you want to know, that effectively enable you to compare the work and the skills, that we compare them against our job model. And we use ML models to effectively cluster and classify work data so that then we can easily identify the same job that's got a different title, or the same title that's a different job, or clusters jobs around skills, or clustering jobs around similar work. So all of that enables us to actually deconstruct it and get a real picture of the job. Now, we then need to focus on data accuracy and confidence, because given that quite a lot of our jobs, I mean, we've got a stat that 50% of jobs are kind of out of date and not accurate. So not all job titles will necessarily reflect the job as it's described. So you need to have a view of what good looks like. So this is where we do two things. So we effectively leverage our job model So we've got a job model within RoleMapper to baseline against. And we also bring in external industry data to benchmark and identify recommendations. So recommendations around the jobs, around the titles, around the work, around the skill, based on sort of other similar roles. And the outcome of all of this is that effectively you've got clarity of the work, you've got standardized jobs, and you can group your jobs however you want to group them in terms of, grouping them by, group the have job groupings, have skills groupings, have work groupings to be able to analyze that. So that was a bit kind of how you can use the tech to kind of have a bit more show of hands, that you have a sense of like what work you've got across your organization and have an accurate view. Now, having a good job model is not just about gathering the data. It's also about how easily you can surface and interrogate your data. And you can respond to those questions about jobs of equal work, or jobs of similar work, or jobs of equal value. Now, the challenge with this is that actually, given what we saw earlier, this current way that we structure our data, how many of you have structured architectures, job architectures? Yeah, so quite a few, which is great. But what we know and what the research tells us is that actually quite a lot of these are not very agile. Am I right in saying that? They're not very dynamic. It's a one and done. They're not really updated very regularly. So current structures might exist, but they're not kind of dynamic as the organisation changes. And then another data point from our research said that actually 70% of the architectures don't really reflect the actual jobs on the ground. And then from an analytics perspective, you've kind of got quite a linear view. Very linear view, so you've got your data saved in your HCM, whether that's Workday, Oracle, SuccessFactors, or wherever it is. And those are saved in fields that drive workflows in the HCM, but the analysis is often an export and done on spreadsheets. So it's quite sort of a linear, traditional way of looking at it. So then compound that with the fact that there was a piece of research from Deloitte that around how people value and level, that actually there's not a lot of robustness around that. It makes for a structure that's a little bit clunky. So this is where we need to be thinking differently and more strategically about our data. So organisations basically need to rip out the outdated job model rulebook, kind of what we just saw, that sort of traditional structure, and shift to a data-driven, flexible approach to jobs, work and skills. So something that we think deeply about at RoleMapper. So rather than having your data stored in spreadsheets or in fields, in systems, that's obviously where data needs to end up to power all your workflows and your single source of truth in your HCM. But actually what you want to be able to do is organize your data around what's called ontologies and taxonomies. So your ontology is these examples here. So you've got an ontology that's made up of a taxonomy of jobs, work, skills, value, etc. And all of these taxonomies have a relationship with the others. They're all interconnected. This is sometimes called knowledge graphs. It's a complex relationship between the various different components. And when you have that data structure and it's fluid and it's flexible and it's built like that, it means that you can really easily then analyze the data. You can really easily report on jobs, on categories of work. You can report on the classic kind of job family view, the career track view, but you can also look at clustering around jobs, equal jobs, or clustering around equal skills or equal value. And you can gain insights too. So patterns start to appear because you're connecting multiple domains. So you can then easily flag anomalies and conduct analysis and sort of answer those questions around equal work. So that's job models. Now let's look at skills. So again, running the theme of pay transparency, and forgive me for those who aren't, this isn't relevant for them, but actually you'll see the relevancy as I go through. So there's a criteria in the directive that basically means that you have to show the criteria for pay progression. So this is a really interesting one. Because what does pay progression actually mean? right? It's the criteria for defining how pay progresses from one job to the next, or within jobs, right? Effectively, this is defining the skills. This is defining the skills criteria that you require from progressing from one job to the next, the skills proficiency criteria. But the skills required both within a job role and between job roles. So what this means is you will need to define the skills requirements across all of your roles, and you will need to specifically specify the proficiency level of these skills. That's quite a mouthful, but hopefully are you following me? So, where do we start? Start with the data. What are the data components of that? What are the component parts of actually that we need to bring together? So let's break it down. Firstly, skills identification. First of all, we need to understand what skills requirements do we have across the organisation. What skills are needed across our jobs? We call these skills tags. So where are the skills across our jobs? Then we need to actually land on a common definition and language of those skills. We need a skills description. We need to describe them in a way that everybody agrees, a common understanding and a common description. Thirdly, we then need to align proficiency. So is that basic level, intermediate, advanced, whatever the proficiency levels you might have, we need to then align a proficiency. And then finally, we actually need to describe that proficiency. This is the Holy Grail. This is the Holy Grail where you're actually describing the skill as it plays out at that specific level of proficiency. Are you all still with me? Yeah, okay. So effectively, this is the data that you will need to be able to map your pay progression criteria. But also, for that matter, it's the data that you will need to be able to map your career paths, to be able to manage performance management, for hiring, and. So there's a lot of connectivity between objectives, right? And then effectiveness. So there we go. So driving kind of the framework to drive those use cases. Now, how many of you actually have a skills taxonomy that's customized to your own organization? Fantastic. Talk later. Great. Skills proficiencies. How many of you actually have mapped out the skills proficiencies? No. Okay. So let's talk about how we can do that quite quickly using technology. Has anyone heard of skills inference? Heard of it? So skills inference is a method of extracting skills from texts. It uses natural language processing to effectively I'll explain how it works. So the job data, all of that work data that we talked about before, goes into the model, and it's deconstructed into component parts. And these parts have meaning that help inform the context of the skill. So that data is processed to identify synonyms, kind of skills concepts, and then further processing happens to kind of normalize and classify the skill. And then the skill can be enriched with categories. So we might want to categorize the skills around, what's a soft skill, what's a technical skill, what's a behavioral, etc. And then we want to be able to put some element of level detection around it. So what level is that skill as it aligns to that particular role in the organization? And. So there's a number of other kind of classifications. Have I still got you? Yeah, okay. Right. What's really important is the actual accuracy and confidence. You need to have, and you want to have confidence that the skills inference has actually found good skills. So anyone can go out and buy a skills taxonomy and plug it into a set of data. But this will most likely land you with an enormous amount of data that's quite difficult to interpret. It's actually really easy, my tech guys will laugh at me, to infer skills. It's not, but it kind of is. But what's hard is finding good skills. So you want the inferred skills are then given a level of confidence score based on frequency analysis, kind of against our job model, like co-occurrence patterns. What I mean by that is interconnectivity, kind of groups of skills, and historical data. And then you've got contextualizing it. So like there's the nuances that in the understanding the full sentence and the context of the job. So for example, the word support. you might pull out the word support. It doesn't necessarily mean support running a help desk if it's in the context of saying support strategy to do blah, blah, blah. Right? So you kind of need to contextualize it. And then there's an element of validating and aligning. So the trick with good skills inference is actually the contextual validation and refinement, and more specifically, interpreting the skill data to make it meaningful. So there's a huge element of training the data, which is actually quite a lot of manual effort, as well as automated, to decide which skill are right and which skills are wrong. But in addition to that, you also, skills inference is really sensitive to the way that content has been written. And so, not all jobs contain reference to the skills required. Not all of our job descriptions are really particularly good quality. So not all the data is going to contain all the information. So we need to have what good looks like. And this is where you can get external data to benchmark, to suggest additional skills, bring that external data component in, to identify the gaps, to identify skills that might be more relevant, might be trending, or more relevant that you can bring in. So this is how you use technology to rapidly identify the skills requirement that you have across your organization. Now, what you would have built here would be your own customized skills taxonomy, customized to your organization. But these are just like tags. These are just words. And for it to be meaningful for pay progression, for career progression for that matter, for performance management, you actually need to translate these skills into descriptions. So you need to write, you need to describe the skill. You need to write and describe the skill's proficiency. That's a huge amount of work, manual work, that often, lots of people go through a lot of pain trying to do it. And there's a lot of stop-start initiatives around it. So I'm going to share with you, bear with me, I'm going to go deep on tech again in a minute. I'm going to share with you how you can use technology to fast-track that content creation. So this is where large language models come in. I'm sure you've all heard of them, ChatGPT, etc. And they can be hugely valuable, but it's more than just throwing all those skills, the content at an open source LLM. So what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to feed those skills into a model, an LLM. However, before you do that, there's a knowledge wrapper, a knowledge enrichment wrapper that fine-tunes the content before it gets put into the LLM. And effectively, there's some advancements called retrieval augmentation. I can sort of go deep down a rabbit hole there, but effectively enables you to add context and improve the accuracy in the generative AI outputs. So it means that actually the large language models generate content for you that can be customized to your organization and the tone of voice. So the skills data processes through the LLM, and the content is generated. So your skills content is generated. Now, then there's this is the content that you will be sharing with your employees, right? So to describe the skills proficiency from one job to another, you need to make sure that it's consistent and that it's accurate. So there's an element of validation. You need to validate the accuracy of the content, and then the read across, as you read across the families or as you read across the levels. So there's that validation element. And then finally, and really important to us and what we do here at RoleMapper, is actually building inclusion in. So it gets processed through our inclusivity model reviewed for example, readability, the sentence length, simple English, debiasing words, so inclusivity around, is it non-gendered words, and then inclusive skills. So what I mean by inclusive skills is the weighting of technical skills versus soft skills. There's been quite a lot of research that has found that, for example, women will not have a tendency to apply for roles where there's an overemphasis on technical skills versus soft. They're more likely to apply if it's the other way around. However, we tend to overemphasize technical skills when we're doing this work. Right, so we want to be able to flag that, and we're able to flag the percentage. And interestingly, ask managers actually what's more important, the technical or the soft, and they say for high performance it's soft. And then degree requirements and years of experience, often those are used to level. So and you can see. So, but bringing in that inclusivity, you never know where this is going to go. It's going to probably end up in a posting somewhere. So you want to make sure that you're building and designing inclusively. Right. 2 more minutes. Summary, the only constant is change, right? So the numbers of skills in our jobs are increasing every year. Skills that we have now are going to be out of date in a couple of years' time. Gartner said that the average number of organizational changes was 5 over the last 3 years in a typical organization. So the only constant is change. So how do we keep up to date with the work and the skills? How can we capture the complexities of sort of managing and maintaining those skills? So we need to shift from a one-off exercise of doing this work to actually creating a dynamic system. So that's what we call a dynamic system of intelligence. So we want to build a system that enables us to capture all our data, right? So here we are back to our ontology and our taxonomy of skills that are all interconnected. And as our organizational changes, as we want to be able to automate those workflows and governance around capturing those changes, capturing new jobs as they're created, new titles as they're created, new levels, new job evaluations, new org structures as they're changing, capturing that and capturing any updates and processing that, involving. And then wrapping around that, putting a layer of intelligence around that, using some of the technologies and more that I described earlier, to processing, deconstruction, to effectively enable us to process that content, generate that content, and then bringing in that external validation data into it. And then finally, we want to add a user experience interface, workspace, so where you can interrogate your data. You can manage your taxonomies of job data, of skills data, of work data. You can manage the processes, the governance, the approval processes. You can update it. You can govern your data. Such that you can then feed it back into your HCM. You can feed it back into your tech stack. You can feed it into the various use cases, pay progression, performance management, whatever that might be. So coming full circle back to the theme of pay transparency, and I'm nearly done. Having a dynamic system of intelligence means that you're able to easily view and report on your jobs, the categories of work, but not just surface your data. You can manage the ongoing governance, the controlling that chaos, having visibility. You can get your house in order, and you can keep your house in order. So, there we go, we're done. Join us?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, join us.
Thank you.